to all come to the same conclusion of what we're trying to do. And I think this project is going to be something that it has to include all entities to make it go off correctly. It'd be different if it was like, I understand like it's an in-kind donation. We're using our personnel to do painting and demolition, sheetrock, whatever. But I think that it would help out the kids, the adults. I don't know how to explain what I'm trying to say here. I think that we just need to get away from that part for this. I think it's a great thing that should happen, and that's really all I gotta say. I'm done.
I would just add that I think one thing that I would say to this is that it's the county thing, but like what JD has just mentioned, it's a community that benefits, and I think we're all going to reap the rewards of this, and we're all going to see the dividends that will pay out in years to come from a project such as this. And I think everybody that donated to this, that when we went out and did the fundraising, realized that point and realized what it was needed. And I think that's why we're kind of coming to the city, to the county, and everyone just to let those barriers down to say, hey, this is county, this is city, the whole entire community will benefit from this, and it's going to pay dividends years to come.
I do have one question, Kevin. When this in-kind donations, will this be done not during after hours? I'm guessing during working hours, or how would this take place?
Either way, it just depends on the when the work is needed to be done. I don't know that they have a timetable yet. Mike, did they discuss an exact timeline?
No, they didn't. We discussed it with our department heads and let them know that the opportunity might be there for us to participate in this. And, the first question was, taking care of the city's needs first during working hours and such, and then possibly working after hours on that project for an impact donation.
I just have one more thing to say. Again, this is about benefit versus, what we're going to pay out here. And in the long run, to me, I wanted to know if it was going to cost more in the future. But, training will produce taxpayers that will pay that donation back tenfold. So then we have to, and that future benefits us, and it future benefits our city, and it future benefits our youth, our everything. So I really believe that this project is a great project, and we do have to work together. But again, the only thing that made me uncomfortable is if it's going to keep adding money. I'm not disagreeing with what they're asking for right now. I just want to make sure that everyone is aware of what I was asking.
Okay, council, any other comments or questions? I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
I second.
I have a motion from Mr. Villa and a second from Ms. Hatman. We'll take a roll call. Ward 1. Aye. Ward 2.
Aye.
Ward 3.
No.
Ward 4.
Aye.
Mayor? Aye. Thank you. Item number 20. Deliberate on fiscal year 2020 through 2021 budget. Mr. Cruz and Ms. Griffin.
Mayor and Council, this is obviously not an action item tonight, but I'm here mainly to initiate a discussion with the petition that we received at the last meeting and was you accepted in this meeting. There were some items on that list to be funded that were pretty necessary. For example, the easements for the Key Largo Bridge, probably being one of the key ones, and that were disruptive to the budget that we had already pretty well put to bed. So wanted to get the conversation started on what that means. We have time left on the calendar to make adjustment, either on the revenue side and or the expense side. Some of that decision-making will be driven by some of our discussions in executive session and whatever follows from that. So I don't think we really need a whole lot of discussion right now, but I wanted to get the seed planted that we may have to do some quick work following tonight. And I didn't want to ignite any fires that didn't need to be started without having some initial discussions about, after we made some decisions on some other issues.
Correct, yeah, this action with the petition does put our budget in a precarious situation. For a couple reasons. We were looking for some needed, very, very needed project money. City Hall, Key Allegra Bridge, drainage downtown, police budget. That appears to be defunded now. The youth facility, some other things that were there. So while we're looking at this, we need to come up with another approach. We'll take a look at this, but we just want to, again, this is not an action item, but we just want to talk about it right now.
So do we might need to go back into another workshop and look over this?
Possible.
Yeah, that's definitely an option that we need to consider. I put in that tax table in the backup material for tonight, just as just to provide some guidance on, so you could remember where we were earlier in the budget discussion. Not as a suggestion on where we need to go, but to kind of establish some boundaries. You'll remember that we can go up to the de minimis amount of $500,000 without without requiring an automatic election. So that's out there, and you can see in the different columns what different rates generate and what the impacts are. And if we want to look at, we discussed this during the budget workshops, you look at cuts. The only places, because of where the most of the capital items were in the certificates of obligation, the only place we can really make up any kind of significant dents in expenditures is in personnel, whether that's eliminating people or making big changes in the other personnel line items. And you look at the departments. On the general fund side, you're looking at PD and parks. They're the only two big departments we have. Other than that, you're looking at departments that are, they say parks is a big department. That's 10 people, not including the director.
Mm-hmm.
And beyond that, you get down to streets, which is 6. And after that, it's onesies, twosies.
Yep.
And nobody's around here is clamoring for fewer police.
Yeah, that was the, I don't know if it was an intended or unintended consequence of this action. I'm not sure how much of the background the community organizers took into consideration when they petitioned us. We did attempt to meet with them. We offered to sit and talk to them, to talk about the impact on the budget, really offered to sit there and show them what we were looking at as far as all the consequences that were possible. But I do respect the public's right to petition and vote. I just wish they would have come to us and sat down and looked at the business component of this, not the emotional side. But again, they petitioned us. We've accepted it in the consent agenda. But we'll go back to Mr. Donahoe and the analogy earlier today. We were talking about, we've been pushing this rock up a very, very steep hill for 3 years now, working with our state and federal partners, crossing all the I's, dotting all the T's, meetings after meetings, which were open to the public. No one came to attend these. And as we get right to the summit, ready to push that rock over and start on our projects, we find the people pushing above us, pushing against us, are our citizens. And not all of them, a little over 5%. But again, I respect their ability to do that. I'm not sure what the motivation was, other than, well, I've got some ideas, but I don't really want to go into that. But Council, any other comments? Again, this is not an action item. It's just something we need to get out front to discuss.
I would like to have I would need to go over and make sure I have all the facts and what we need to do.
Else?
Andrea, were you done?
Yes.
Well, Kevin, as I appreciate what this table says, if I go across the total revenue, the column that shows the de minimis full $500,000 number generates 7.5% more revenue, and that is more than increasing the tax rate by 9% in the last column. In other words, taking the 500,000 de minimis is functionally a 9% raise in taxes over no new revenue.
Correct.
That only gets us $500,000. Our budget was based on a need for new revenue of $480,000.
Yes, sir.
So even taking the full de minimis rate of 500,000 is only going to generate 20,000 more dollars, and would be a 9% raise in the tax rate over the no new revenue rate.
That's correct.
And the right-of-way alone as a single item in the certificate of obligation list is a $650,000 item. So it's already $150,000 over the most that we would be able to get if we took the de minimis rate at 500,000.
That's right.
So that if we were to go forward with the bridge project, we would have to forego all of the items for which our budget sought the 480. Plus, we would have to come up with another 150,000, which I guess comes out of our reserve fund or out of personnel cuts. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And if we draw down on the reserves, then that has an effect on our bond rating. So that because we live in a hurricane zone, we are already a little behind the 8 ball with underwriters on bonds who look at a city like ours and say, well, how can I be guaranteed of the security of my investment? I can look at a city like Rockport, and it has built up a reserve so that it's capable of sustaining a hurricane. If we no longer have that reserve because we're using it to pay for our rights of way,
then our bond rating will be lowered, most likely, and that means our borrowing rate will increase. Is that all right?
Correct, and this last bond rating for this issue, our rating was affirmed this time. It did not go down. However, the company, Standards and Poor's, did make note that we have been drawing down on reserves, and that was a cause for concern. So we cannot continue to do that without there probably being an impact next time and a downgrade in that credit rating. And as you say, that would lead to higher interest rate, which translates into more cost for our citizens. And I think we discussed last time, just a 0.25% difference in an interest rate on this particular issue over the term of 20 years translates into $451,000 in more cost to the taxpayers.
So if we were drawing down and the CO does not come up for a vote till May, which is the earliest it would be voted on if for the items that would, that would qualify, maybe all of them, then we would have drawn down on our reserves most likely by then and would be facing potentially higher rating over the next 20 years, higher bond interest rating, because of our lowered security rating. And the taxpayers would then be paying that over the next 20 years at a higher rate. And that's not to include whatever may happen worldwide or in the elections come November, which can also affect the interest rate that has nothing to do with the city, or that would be on top of whatever the city is facing.
And were we to have another storm come through, we could become Indianola from a financial standpoint.
Which is what happened to Rockport in 1919 after it got hit in 1916 and 1919. It was moribund for 20 years.
That's correct.
We lost out on the channel that went to Corpus Christi instead, although maybe that was a blessing in disguise. Let me walk through the consequences if we do not fund the right-of-way for Key Allegro. My understanding is that if we don't fund the right-of-way, obviously we can't close on them. If we can't close on the right-of-way, then we cannot go forward with our contractor to remove the utilities that are currently on the bridge, bore underneath the channel, and bring them up into Key Allegro. Until we have accomplished that contracting work, TxDOT will not start the project. Currently, TxDOT has already put off the project twice because of delays that we've had. It's now currently set for January of 2021, but obviously we wouldn't make that if we don't pay the ROWs. My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that TxDOT stood up to take this project, as I appreciate it, under some political pressure to do that out of sympathy for us in our plight post-hurricane. It's not a state highway. They don't have to do it. It's not part of their charge normally. Because they build bridges all the time, they could build it for about $2.5 million. But if the city had to do it, we're not bridge builders. We don't have economies of scale. We don't have contractors who we work with every day to do that. And it would cost us probably closer to $4 million to build the same bridge if we were on our own.
The original FEMA estimate was $4 million for a temporary bridge, and started out at $8, but ended up the total project, including the temporary, about $16 million, which we could not afford the match on that. Working with friends in Austin, calling contacts, calling in some favors, we were able to get this project brought to the attention of some key people in Austin. who sat down and got TxDOT to agree to take it. I still don't think they wanted to take it, because if it's a one-off, it's not their bridge. But they graciously accepted it, did the engineering. But this would be bid out under the under the TxDOT Bridge Replacement Program, which this was a high-level decision, governor's level decision to do this.
And TxDOT has been very good to work with.
Very good. They've been terrific, as professional as you want to be. They've bent over backwards. They put divers in the water after every storm. We had divers in the water, Mike, about a month ago, right after Hannah.
So on the other hand, they build highways and bridges all around the state, and we have to be on a list for the next opportunity. We are currently, but we would lose that listing if we do go forward.
Correct.
And at some point, presumably, TxDOT would be able to say, we have not lived up to our part of the bargain. Sorry, they're not interested anymore. There's nothing that requires them to keep this on their list in perpetuity.
Well, this petition also has jeopardized a $285,000 Texas Department of Agriculture grant that we also use some political capital on. After being told no 3 or 4 times, we're finally able to get to a commissioner who recognized our plight, had some money, and committed the money to us. But because of this delay in their departmental regulations, the project has to be, in order to be funded, it has to be complete in 1 year. And we've already passed that deadline. We've asked for an extension, but we were told last Friday, once we realized the impact of the petition, that they probably weren't going to be able to help us. Without saying no, they said, just really don't count on it. Mike, you wanted to say something?
Again, as I said before, we stand to jeopardize our relationships for the future when we literally have TxDOT in a bind statewide. They can only let so many projects within each region of TxDOT statewide. And we've had this project in the queue for 2 years now. And each time that there's a raise on contracts, they're calling us and asking us where we're at with the utility relocation project as to whether or not they have to take it out of that queue for funding. And we've had to do that numerous times with TxDOT. You may think the fact that they could put it down and walk away. I don't believe that they would do that, but we are holding up TxDOT statewide with our inability to move forward with this project. And again, all the favors that we called in, everyone that we called in Austin to try to figure out a way to find a financially stable way to replace this bridge within our community that wasn't going to handicap us into the future. It's been through a lot of political clout and a lot of relationships, getting TxDOT, getting TDM and the governor's office come to the table and meet with us and figure out a way to rebuild this small bridge within our community. And, you mentioned it before, people in Austin and in Washington, they're looking at us and saying, we expended a lot of political clout to get you guys the help that you need. And, I don't believe that they're going to do it again if we reject the help that has been given to us. And plus, if we don't do it now, it's going to cost our community a lot more money in the future. Everything that we've got on the table is going to cost us much, much more in the future if we don't move forward and utilize all the opportunities we have, all the partnerships that we form, all the good interest rates that we're able to get on these things. If we don't move forward with this, we're going backwards.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize, it's not just the potential to lose the cash, the money, but it's also the loss in the political capital. I mean, those that weren't here at the time, when we finally got TxDOT to accept this bridge project, in this room where we're at right now, there were 42 people that eventually came around the table that included the executive director of TxDOT, that included the chancellor of the A&M A&M system and the vice chancellor of A&M, the provost. We had our state senator, our state representative. I mean, all those people were here. That didn't happen because they just happened to be in the neighborhood. They were here because we pulled strings for them to be here. And that's happened not only on that project, but on City Hall, on the courthouse downtown anchor project. That comes at a cost, not in dollars directly, but in political capital. We spent it on those, and that came at the expense of other projects in the past, other projects in the future that we're going to have to deal with that we don't know about yet. And if we squander it by not going forward, people remember that. Yeah.
I have a question. Actually, it's for Bob. Bob, I know that you well, from what I usually read on Facebook, you went out and tried to talk to petitioners while they were trying to sign. But did you specifically tell the organizers of the consequences? I know you're telling us all these consequences because we know, and you're reiterating the consequences. But did you tell these organizers the potential, what could possibly happen whenever you were out there and speak to them? Because, I mean, I've seen your name come up plenty of times that you've talked to them.
I did, and in fact, they agreed to let people that know that was a potential consequence. And they included that cascade of consequences, or some of them, the most important ones, with the petition that they were presenting with people. My experience was not very many people wanted to talk to me about the big particulars. They were there because they wanted to vote. And, the particulars of the items were not so important to them as that they be able to vote on the bond. So yes and no, I guess is the answer.
Yeah,
I'd like to just take, 3 more minutes to talk about what the bridge means, because we've assumed its importance. I think everybody understands. I'm not really talking to my fellow council people, because you all know, it's the one way of access to Key Allegro. Key Allegro is 800 homes. Key Allegro is 25% of the ad valorem tax value that provide tax revenues that run the city of Rockport. That's their only way on and off, and Hurricane Harvey, because of the volume of water, undermined the pilings that hold that bridge up. It held up under Hannah. There's no additional damage, but the new bridge is intended to make that broader and more resistant. If we do get one more storm that's as big as Harvey, there's every possibility that bridge goes down, in which case there is no access, in which case, guess what's going to happen to the property values of all the people who own homes there, and all of that property value that we tax and that we use in order to provide services to everybody else in Rockport, a lot of which are second homes, so they're not taking a lot of services like full-time residents. And they're even taxed more because it's not a homestead. So it is a critical part of the city. It is a critical piece of infrastructure. And I don't see how, whatever other decisions we make, budget-wise, revenue-wise, I don't see how there is an alternative but to find some way to be able to move forward on it so that it gets built by TxDOT.
I'll go back and look at the numbers and who's holding us up on this, the unintended consequences. We have 6,265 active voters in the city. So in order for the petition to be valid, we had to have 313 signatures. They turned in the petition with 489 signatures. And I've heard comments where they claim to have gotten the required number of signatures on day one. But after going through the petition, we only had 383 verified signatures, and they beat the requirement by 70 signatures. On day one, they had 18 signatures. Day two, they had 26. On day 3, they had 242 verified signatures, which was well short of the number needed. So they finally got it on the last day. And the petitioners, it's interesting. There's a Mr. Roland Rios, Mr. Andrew Kane, April Clark, not a registered voter in the city of Rockport, Anna Marie Monroe, not a registered voter in the city of Rockport, Jeff W. Hutt, not a registered voter in the city of Rockport, Keith Allen, Candace Sargent, Kathleen Jackson, Cheryl Matlock, and Wayne Severson. These community organizers went out without having the facts or even presented the facts correctly, and I say that and I'll explain that in a minute, to the people they asked to sign the petition. I had several friends and business leaders in this community that signed the petition, and I asked them, I said, do you realize what was on there? I said, well, we wanted a chance to